Is OnlyFans a sin, or is that question already too simple for the world we live in now? Because this is not just a conversation about sex. It is a conversation about loneliness, money, power, performance, desire, and what happens when intimacy becomes something people can package, sell, subscribe to, and consume in private while pretending it has no spiritual cost. So, before we rush to judgment, we need to ask a harder question. What exactly is happening when the camera turns on? OnlyFans is often framed in two opposite ways. On one side, people call it empowerment. A woman controls her image, sets the price, owns the platform relationship, and profits directly from desire in an economy that has always monetized female bodies anyway. On the other side, people call it degradation, exploitation, or digital prostitution with better branding. Most people choose one of those stories and stop thinking. But the truth is usually less clean than ideology wants it to be. For some people, OnlyFans feels like freedom because it offers money, flexibility, and a sense of control in a world where traditional work can feel humiliating, underpaid, and emotionally dead. For other people, it feels like a system that repackages old sexual exploitation in a modern interface and then markets it as choice because choice sounds less violent than pressure. That is why this topic has to be handled carefully. If we only speak in the language of personal freedom, we may ignore coercion, economics, trauma, algorithmic pressure, and what desire does in markets. But if we only speak in the language of sin without compassion, we may ignore debt, survival, fear, the hunger for control, and the fact that many people do not enter sexualized digital labor from a place of power, as much as from a place of limited options. From a traditional Christian perspective, sexuality is never treated as morally neutral content. It is tied to personhood, covenant, embodiment, dignity, truth, and the meaning of intimacy. The Bible does not imagine sex as something detached from the self, something spiritually harmless as long as it is consensual and monetized cleanly. In Scripture, the body is not an object you simply use. It carries moral and spiritual meaning. That matters because modern culture often treats autonomy as the highest moral category. If I choose it, if I profit from it, if I control it, then it must be morally legitimate. But Christianity has never said that consent alone determines goodness. A person can choose something that still deforms the soul, confuses love, reshapes desire, and teaches the body to function as a product rather than as a gift. So is OnlyFans a sin? If we stay inside classical Christian sexual ethics, the answer leans strongly yes, because it involves the deliberate creation and sale of sexualized content for consumption outside the covenantal context Christianity gives to sexuality. It invites lust, monetizes voyeurism, and turns intimacy into spectacle. In biblical terms, it is very hard to separate that from porneia, from disordered sexual practice that detaches the body from holy meaning. But if we stop there, we may say something doctrinally clear and humanly shallow, because the moral question is not only what category the act fits into, it is also what world produces it. Why are so many people willing to sell access to their bodies online? Why are so many people willing to buy it? What kind of emotional, economic, and relational order makes that feel normal? The online economy rewards visibility, attention, emotional intensity, and intimacy converted into monetizable engagement. That means sexuality does not appear here by accident. It appears because desire sells, loneliness pays, and platforms learn quickly what human weakness will reliably fund. In that environment, OnlyFans is not a weird exception. It is a logical outcome of a digital culture that has already trained people to brand themselves, perform themselves, and turn every part of life into content. This is where the question of exploitation becomes unavoidable. Some people hear the word exploitation and immediately object. I'm saying no one is forcing anyone. Adults are choosing. Money is being exchanged, and that should end the argument. But exploitation does not require chains to be real. Sometimes exploitation happens whenever vulnerability, need, trauma, isolation, or financial pressure are turned into profit under the language of freedom. That does not mean every person on OnlyFans understands their experience the same way. Some creators will sincerely describe it as empowering. They may feel safer than in offline sex work, more in control than in abusive jobs, and more financially independent than they have ever felt before. Those experiences should not be mocked. A serious moral conversation has to be able to hear what people themselves say about their lives, but listening seriously also means asking whether feeling in control is the same thing as being free in the deepest sense. A person can experience agency within a system that is still shaping them in costly ways. They can profit and still be used. They can choose and still be narrowed by the menu of choices available to them. Freedom is more complicated than the presence of consent in a marketplace. Christianity would push even deeper. It would ask not only who consents, but what vision of the human person is being practiced. Is the body something sacred, personal, and relational? Or is it a visual asset that can be segmented, branded, and sold? Is desire something to be disciplined and integrated into love? Or is it something to be harvested for revenue as efficiently as possible? This is why the consumer matters as much as the creator. People often discuss OnlyFans as though the moral burden falls almost entirely on the person producing content, while the buyer remains strangely invisible. But the demand side reveals just as much. What kind of loneliness, entitlement, fantasy, and fragmentation makes a person willing to substitute purchased digital intimacy for embodied human relationship? The Christian tradition has always taken lust seriously, not because desire itself is evil, but because desire easily learns to consume rather than to love. Once another person becomes content for private use, a screen for projection, or a paid vessel for fantasy, something morally important has already shifted. The camera may make it feel distant, but moral distance is not the same thing as innocence. And this is where modern autonomy runs into a hard limit. We like to say, my body, my choice, my platform, my income. But Christianity asks whether the self is really flourishing when sexuality is separated from covenant, dignity from privacy, and intimacy from mutual gift. It asks whether some forms of choice can still train the heart in ways that are spiritually destructive, even when they are legal and profitable. There is also the question of what this does to relationships. Even if someone argues that online sexual content is less harmful than physical betrayal, it still reshapes the imagination. It teaches people to split desire from responsibility, arousal from presence, access from commitment, and attention from love. Over time, that can make embodied fidelity harder, not easier, because the soul gets used to consuming intimacy without being asked to become trustworthy. Some defenders of OnlyFans argue that morality should change because the medium changed. There is no physical contact, no street, no brothel, no traditional pimp in the obvious sense. It is digital, direct-to-consumer, self-managed, and often framed as entrepreneurial. But Christianity has never taught that moral reality disappears just because the form becomes cleaner, more private, or more technologically sophisticated. In fact, digital environments can intensify certain illusions. The distance of the screen can make people feel detached from the humanity of the other person. The polished aesthetics can make exploitation look voluntary, desirable, and even glamorous. The subscription model can make loneliness feel relational when it is actually monetized simulation. Technology does not remove moral danger, it often refines it. So is OnlyFans exploitation or freedom? For some, it may feel like freedom inside a constrained world. For others, it is clearly exploitative, and in many cases, it is probably both at once. Agency operating inside systems that still profit from alienation, loneliness, inequality, and sexual appetite. That is what makes the question morally difficult. Reality is often more tragic than slogans allow. Christian ethics does not solve that tragedy by pretending economics are irrelevant. Poverty matters, debt matters, trauma matters, gendered power matters. The desperation behind choices matters. But neither does Christianity surrender the moral meaning of the body just because late capitalism has learned how to monetize it more efficiently. Compassion cannot require moral silence. So if you ask me whether OnlyFans is a sin, the clearest Christian answer is yes, but not in the shallow way people often mean it. Not as a label thrown to feel superior, not as as a way of pretending the consumer is innocent, not as a way of ignoring exploitation, loneliness, and financial pressure. It is sin in the deeper sense that it participates in a disordered vision of sexuality, personhood, and desire, even when it arrives dressed as freedom. And maybe the most uncomfortable part is that the platform did not invent the problem. It simply made visible what modern culture already believes: that attention can replace love, that consent can replace wisdom, that profit can cleanse desire, and that the body can be fragmented into content without changing the soul. OnlyFans may be new, but the spiritual hunger beneath it is very old. So, does morality change when the camera turns on? Or does the camera only expose what we were already willing to justify once sex, loneliness, money, and power met each other online? Maybe the final question is not only what the platform allows, but what it teaches both creators and consumers to become. See you in the next video. If you learned something new today, like this video and subscribe.